The red giant star Kepler 442 was dying, and with it, an entire civilization was about to become homeless. Admiral James Harrison pressed his palm against the cold viewport of the U.S. Defiance, watching the emergency signals flicker across his ship's communication array. The distress calls have been coming for weeks now, growing weaker each day as the Zephyrian refugee fleet drifted further into the void. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the lead Zephyrian vessel," Lieutenant Rebecca Chin reported from her station. Her voice carried a weight that everyone on the bridge could feel. They'd all been listening to these calls, watching an entire species slowly fade away in the darkness of space. Harrison turned away from the viewport and walked to the center of the bridge. Around him, his crew worked quietly, their usual chatter subdued. Everyone knew what was happening out there, and everyone felt powerless to stop it. The Zephyrians were dying, not from war or disease, but from something far worse, complete abandonment by every other species in the galaxy. "Put it through," Harrison ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a Zephyrian ship. The beings on screen looked remarkably similar to humans, except for their blue-tinted skin, and the way their eyes seemed to hold an inner light. Their leader, someone the translation software identified as Elder Ketvar, spoke in their melodic language while subtitles appeared at the bottom of the screen. "To any who might hear this message, we are the survivors of Kepler 442. Our world is gone, consumed by our dying star. We seek only refuge, a place to rebuild our lives. We offer our knowledge, our friendship, our loyalty to any who would grant us sanctuary. Please, we have children among us. They deserve a chance to see tomorrow." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. Captain Robert Turner, Harrison's second-in-command, shook his head slowly. 47 ships, he said quietly. Nearly 2 million people, including families with young ones, and the entire galaxy has turned its back on them. The reason for this cosmic cruelty was as stupid as it was tragic. When the Zephyrian sun had begun its death throes, some superstitious species had convinced themselves that the blue-skinned refugees were somehow responsible. They called them star killers and harbingers of stellar death, spreading fear throughout the galactic community that harboring these survivors would doom their own worlds to the same fate. It was complete nonsense, of course. Stars died according to the laws of physics, not because of some mystical curse carried by their former inhabitants. But fear and superstition had always been stronger than logic, especially when an entire species was at stake. The Galactic Council voted unanimously, added Lieutenant Patricia Williams from the intelligence station. Complete quarantine. No species is allowed to offer them sanctuary, trade with them, or even acknowledge their existence. They've been branded as a galactic threat. Harrison studied the star charts, showing the Zephyrian fleet's trajectory. They were heading toward the galaxy's outer rim, where empty space stretched for thousands of light years. Without fuel, food, or hope, they would drift until their life support systems finally failed. It would be a slow death, lasting months or maybe even years. "Sir," Rebecca spoke up again, "we're also picking up communications from several other species. The Altarians, the Proximans, even the Centaurians. They're all warning their ships to avoid this sector entirely. Some are even proposing to actively push the Zephyrian fleet further away from inhabited systems." The bridge fell silent again. Everyone present understood what they were witnessing. Not just the death of a species, but the moral failure of an entire galactic civilization. These weren't dangerous criminals or hostile invaders being cast out. These were refugees, families, people who had lost everything and were asking for nothing more than a chance to survive. Harrison made his decision. "Rebecca, open a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha." The young lieutenant's eyes widened slightly. Priority Alpha was reserved for matters of planetary security or first contact situations. "Sir, are you sure?" "The political ramifications." "Open a channel," Harrison repeated firmly. Within minutes, the secure line connected him directly to the highest levels of Earth's government. Harrison found himself speaking to people whose decisions would shape humanity's future in the galaxy. He told them about the Zephyrian fleet, about their desperate situation, and about the galaxy's shameful response. The conversation lasted over an hour. Harrison answered every question, provided every detail, and made his recommendation clear. When the call ended, he turned to face his crew. They were all watching him with expressions of hope and fear mixed together. "What did they say, sir?" Robert asked. Harrison allowed himself a small smile. "They said they'd get back to us within 24 hours. But reading between the lines, I think humanity is about to do something that will either make us heroes or outcasts in this galaxy." The emergency session of the United Nations Security Council had been going on for 6 hours, and President William Carter could feel the tension crackling through the air like electricity before a thunderstorm. Around the massive oak table, representatives from every major nation on Earth sat with grim expressions, knowing that the decision they made today would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Ambassador Lisa Reynolds from the Altarian Embassy stood at the front of the room, her usually calm demeanor replaced by something approaching desperation. The tall, gray-skinned alien had been humanity's strongest ally for over 50 years, but today she looked like someone delivering a death sentence. "I cannot stress this enough," she said, her translator converting her words into perfect English. "If you harbor these Epherians, every species in the galaxy will turn against you. Trade agreements worth trillions of credits will vanish overnight. Your colonies will be left defenseless. Your exploratory missions will be attacked on sight." General Michael Thompson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned back in his chair and studied the holographic display, showing Earth's military capabilities. Ambassador Reynolds, with respect, "We've survived for thousands of years without galactic protection. We're not as helpless as you might think." The Altarian's eyes flashed with frustration. "General, you don't understand the scale of what you're considering. The Centaurian Trade Federation alone controls shipping routes to 40% of your outer colonies. The Proximan Defense Fleet has been your backup for every major crisis in the past decade. You're talking about throwing away centuries of diplomatic progress for a species that might actually be cursed." Dr. Helen Clark from the Scientific Advisory Board slammed her hand on the table. "Curse? Are we seriously discussing policy based on superstition? These people lost their homeworld to a natural stellar phenomenon. They're refugees, not demons." "But what if the other species are right?" asked Secretary of State Jennifer Walsh, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if there really is something about them that brings disaster? Can we risk the lives of 8 billion humans on a guess?" President Carter had been listening to this debate for hours, but his mind kept drifting back to the recordings they'd received from Admiral Harrison. He'd watched the Zephyrian transmissions dozens of times, studying the faces of their leaders, their scientists, their families. He'd seen children playing in the background of some communications, their laughter somehow managing to carry across the vast emptiness of space. "Dr. Clark," Carter said, "what do our own scientists say about the stellar curse theory?" The elderly physicist adjusted her glasses and pulled up a new holographic display. "Complete nonsense, sir. We've analyzed the Zephyrian sun's collapse using our best stellar modeling software. It was a textbook-read giant death sequence, exactly what our theories predict. The timing was unfortunate, but there's absolutely no evidence of external influence." "The galaxy doesn't care about evidence," Ambassador Reynolds interjected. "They care about fear. And right now, every species from here to the galactic core is terrified that the Zephyrians will bring the same fate to their worlds." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of the decision before them. Carter looked around the table at the faces of his advisors, seeing the same conflict reflected in each of their expressions. They all knew what the right thing to do was, but they also understood the price humanity might pay for doing it. Captain David Walsh, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room, finally spoke up. "Mr. President, if I may, I've been in contact with Admiral Harrison's fleet for the past week, monitoring the Zephyrian situation. These people aren't asking for charity or special treatment. They're offering to share their technology, their knowledge, everything they have left. Their understanding of stellar mechanics is centuries ahead of ours. Technology won't matter if we're cut off in the galaxy," General Thompson pointed out. "We need those trade routes, those alliances. Our expansion into the outer rim depends on galactic cooperation." Carter stood up slowly, feeling the weight of 8 billion lives on his shoulders. He walked to the large window overlooking the Manhattan skyline, where the lights of human civilization sparkled in the growing darkness. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars visible to the naked eye, 47 ships full of desperate people were waiting for someone to show them kindness. I keep thinking about something my grandfather used to say. Carter said, without turning around, he fought in World War II, saw humanity at both its worst and its best. He always told me that the measure of a civilization isn't how it treats its friends, but how it treats those who have nothing to offer in return. He turned back to face the room. The Zephyrians aren't offering us technology because they want something from us. They're offering it because they're grateful that someone finally listened to their distress calls. That tells me everything I need to know about their character. Ambassador Reynolds shook her head sadly. President Carter, I've served as a diplomat for over 2 centuries. I've seen species rise and fall, alliances form and crumble. What you're considering will mark humanity as outcasts. You'll be alone in a hostile galaxy. Carter met her gaze steadily. Maybe we'll show the galaxy what it means to stand up for what's right, regardless of the consequences. Captain Walsh, contact Admiral Harrison. Tell him to extend an invitation to the Zephyrian fleet. They're welcome on Earth. The room erupted in voices, some protesting, others supporting the decision. But Carter had made up his mind. Within hours, human ships would be moving to escort 2 million refugees to safety, and humanity would discover whether compassion was a strength or a weakness in the cold vastness of space. The last Centaurian cargo ship disappeared into hyperspace with a flash of blue light, leaving Luna Station eerily quiet. Colonel Patricia Hayes watched from the observation deck as the massive vessel carried away the final shipment of quantum processors that Earth would receive for the foreseeable future, maybe forever. That's it then, said Lieutenant Commander Rachel Stone, joining Patricia at the viewport. No more exotic materials, no more advanced medical supplies, no more backup. When our outer colonies run into trouble, we're officially on our own. It had been 3 months since President Carter made his decision to welcome the Zephyrians, and the galaxy's response had been swift and merciless. Trade sanctions hit first, cutting off the flow of advanced technology that human civilization had grown dependent on. Then came the diplomatic expulsions, with human ambassadors being escorted off alien worlds by security forces. Finally, the military partnerships dissolved, leaving human colonies scattered across the outer rim, without the protection they relied on for decades. Down on Earth's surface, however, something remarkable was taking shape. The Zephyrian settlement of New Kepler stretched across the Canadian wilderness, a blend of organic curves and crystalline structures that seemed to grow from the landscape itself rather than being built upon it. Dr. Thomas Wright, leading the integration team, walked through the settlement each morning with a sense of wonder that never seemed to fade. They don't just build things, he explained to Director Helen Foster during their weekly briefing. They grow them. Their entire approach to engineering is based on working with natural forces rather than fighting against them. Watch this. Thomas led Helen to a construction site where Zephyrian engineers were working alongside human technicians. One of the aliens, a soft-spoken scientist named Veltar, placed his hands on what looked like a metal seed the size of a basketball. As Helen watched in amazement, the seed began to expand and reshape itself, metal flowing like liquid to form a framework of a building. It's not magic, Thomas said, seeing Helen's expression. It's advanced materials science combined with energy manipulation techniques we're just beginning to understand. They can program matter at the molecular level, telling it exactly how to grow and what shape to take. The integration wasn't happening without problems, though. Cultural misunderstandings arose daily, sometimes leading to frustration on both sides. Humans communicated through words and facial expressions, while Zephyrians relied heavily on subtle changes in the bioluminescent patterns that flickered beneath their blue skin. What looked like agreement to a human might actually be polite disagreement to a Zephyrian, and vice versa. Dr. Brian Collins, a linguist working with the Cultural Exchange Program, spent his days trying to bridge these gaps. It's like learning to see color for the first time, he told his team during a particularly challenging session. We've been having conversations in black and white while they've been speaking in full spectrum. No wonder we keep missing each other's meanings. But slowly, painfully, progress was being made. Young Zephyrian scientists worked late into the night with their human counterparts, sharing knowledge that had taken their species millennia to develop. In exchange, humans offered something equally valuable: adaptability and creative problem-solving that impressed even the most experienced Zephyrian researchers. The real test of this partnership came when the Proxima Defense Fleet, humanity's oldest military ally, arrived at the edge of the solar system. Admiral Harrison received the transmission aboard his flagship, watching as Commander Thexal, a being who had once been a close friend, delivered his ultimatum with obvious reluctance. Admiral Harrison, by order of the Galactic Council, you have 72 hours to surrender the Zephyrian refugees for relocation to a quarantine facility in the outer darkness. Failure to comply will result in immediate military intervention. The outer darkness was a region of space so far from any star that ships could drift for centuries without encountering another vessel. It was essentially a death sentence disguised as humanitarian relocation. Harrison's response was broadcast across every communication channel in the system, ensuring that both humans and Zephyrians heard his words clearly. Commander Thexal, I've known you for 15 years. We fought side by side against pirates, rescued colonies from natural disasters, and celebrated victories together. You know me well enough to predict my answer. The Proximan commander's shoulders sagged slightly. I do, old friend, and I'm sorry it has to end this way. Back on Earth, the news of the ultimatum spread quickly through both communities. In New Kepler, Elder Kethvar called an emergency assembly of his people. Many Zephyrians, overcome with guilt at the trouble they brought to their human hosts, began discussing the possibility of voluntary surrender. We cannot let your species suffer for our sake, Kethvar said during a joint meeting with human leadership. Perhaps it would be better if we accepted exile to spare you further hardship. President Carter's response was immediate and firm. Elder Kethvar, when my ancestors came to America, they found people who were willing to help strangers survive in a harsh land. Some of those early partnerships failed, but the ones that succeeded built something stronger than either group could have achieved alone. We didn't invite you here out of pity. We invited you because we believe in the possibility of building something better together. As Proximan warships began moving toward Earth, both species worked frantically to prepare their defenses. The Zephyrians shared everything they knew about energy shielding and weapon systems, while humans contributed their expertise in tactics and rapid deployment. Neither species was particularly warlike, but they were about to discover what they could accomplish when survival demanded innovation. The galaxy was about to learn that compassion, when backed by determination and ingenuity, could be the most dangerous force in the universe. The first enemy missiles streaked toward the Mars orbital shipyards like deadly shooting stars, their warheads designed to cripple humanity's industrial capacity in a single devastating blow. Commander Rachel Stone gripped the armrests of her command chair aboard the U.S. Harmony, watching the attack unfold on her tactical display. 6 months ago, those missiles would have found their targets easily, turning the shipyards into floating debris. But 6 months ago, the Harmony had been just another human warship. Energy shields at full capacity, reported Lieutenant Mark Anderson from the weapons console. His voice carried a confidence that would have seemed impossible during the dark days following the galactic embargo. Zephyrian power cores are responding perfectly to our targeting systems. The Harmony moved through space with a grace that defied physics, or at least defied what humans had thought they knew about physics. Zephyrian engineers had spent months teaching their human counterparts how to bend energy rather than simply containing it, how to flow with gravitational forces instead of fighting against them. The result was a ship that danced between incoming fire like a leaf on the wind. Return fire, but remember the rules, Rachel ordered. Disable, don't destroy. We're not here to commit genocide. This was perhaps the strangest aspect of the entire conflict. Despite being attacked by a coalition of 12 species intent on wiping out both humans and Zephyrians, Earth's forces had strict orders to avoid unnecessary casualties. It was a decision that had sparked heated debates in military circles, but Elder Kethvar had been adamant about it during the joint strategy sessions. Violence born from fear can be cured, he had said in his gentle way. Violence born from hatred cannot. We must show them that we are not the monsters they believe us to be. Down on Earth's surface, the partnership between the two species had evolved far beyond simple cooperation. Dr. Jenny Walsh led a research team that included both human physicists and Zephyrian theorists, working in laboratories that looked more like art studios and scientific facilities. Holographic displays showed complex energy patterns that shifted and flowed like living things, responding to thoughts as much as a touch. The breakthrough came when we stopped thinking of technology as tools and started thinking of them as partners. Jenny explained to a group of visiting military officers. Watch this. She approached one of the defensive grid control systems, a strange hybrid of human engineering and Zephyrian biotechnology. As her hands moved across the control surface, the patterns responded, but not to her physical touch. Instead, the system seemed to read her intentions, her emotional state, even her unconscious reactions to the tactical situation developing in orbit. It's not telepathy, she clarified quickly, seeing concerned expressions on the officers' faces. It's more like the system learning to recognize the bioelectric patterns that accompany human decision-making. The Zephyrians taught us that consciousness and technology don't have to be separate things. The real test of this human-Zephyrian symbiosis came when the full Galactic Coalition arrived. Admiral Harrison watched from the bridge of his flagship as sensor readings showed the size of the force arrayed against them. 300 warships from 12 different species, each one bringing their most advanced weapons and defensive systems. By every conventional measure, Earth didn't stand a chance. "Sir," reported Captain David Walsh from the tactical station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Coalition commander. It's Admiral Zexton of the Altarian First Fleet." Harrison had known this moment would come. Zexton had been a friend once, before politics and fear had driven a wedge between their species. The Altarian Admiral appeared on the main screen, his usually calm demeanor replaced by grim determination. "Admiral Harrison, you have one final opportunity to surrender the Zephyrian refugees and avoid further bloodshed. Our combined forces outnumber yours 10-1. Please don't force us to destroy everything you've built." Harrison looked around his bridge, seeing humans and Zephyrians working side by side at every station. Veltar, the young Zephyrian scientist, was collaborating with Lieutenant Patricia Williams on shield harmonics. Their partnership had produced offensive capabilities that neither species could have achieved alone. "Admiral Zexton, you're right about one thing. You definitely have more ships than we do, but you're making the same mistake that every bully throughout history has made. You're assuming that bigger automatically means stronger. The battle that followed lasted only 6 hours, but it changed the course of galactic history. Human adaptability merged with Zephyrian energy mastery, created something entirely new. Ships that could phase through solid matter, weapons that disabled rather than destroyed, defensive systems that learned and evolved in real time. The Coalition forces found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move while refusing to deliver killing blows. General Michael Thompson, coordinating the defense from Earth's surface, worked closely with Elder Kethvar to develop tactics that neither species could have conceived alone. It's not about winning or losing anymore, Thompson realized as he watched the battle unfold. It's about showing them that there's a different way to resolve conflicts. When the Coalition's flagship found itself surrounded by human Zephyrian vessels, its weapons disabled and crew unharmed, Admiral Zexton finally understood what he was truly facing. This wasn't just a military alliance between two species. It was proof that cooperation could achieve what aggression never could. The galaxy was about to learn that evolution didn't always come through conquest. Ambassador Lisa Reynolds sat across from President Carter in the rebuilt United Nations headquarters, her once proud posture now humbled by the events of the past year. The Altarian diplomat who had warned humanity about the consequences of harboring the Zephyrians now found herself in the unprecedented position of asking for mercy from the very species she had tried to intimidate. "Your fleet could have destroyed us completely," she said quietly, her translator converting her words with unusual precision. "The technology you've developed with the Zephyrians is unlike anything we've encountered in 3,000 years of galactic civilization. Our weapons were useless, our shields meaningless. Yet you chose to disable our ships instead of annihilating them." President Carter nodded toward Elder Kethvar, who had become not just an advisor, but a genuine friend during the months of crisis. The elderly Zephyrians' bioluminescent patterns flickered in what humans had learned was their equivalent of a gentle smile. Ambassador Reynolds, when we first met in this room, you warned us that showing compassion would make us outcasts in the galaxy. You weren't wrong about the isolation we'd face, but you were wrong about what we become because of it. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. What began as a desperate alliance between refugees and their protectors had evolved into something entirely new. In laboratories around the world, human scientists worked alongside Zephyrian researchers, sharing knowledge that advanced both species beyond what either could have achieved alone. Dr. Thomas Wright, now director of the Joint Research Initiative, published papers that revolutionized everything from medical technology to space travel. The key was learning to think differently about cooperation itself. Wright explained during a press conference that was broadcast across dozens of star systems. Humans have always been good at adapting and improvising. Zephyrians are masters of understanding energy and natural systems. When you combine adaptability with deep knowledge, you don't just get better tools. You get entirely new ways of solving problems. The proof of this partnership's success became evident when other marginalized species began arriving at Earth's borders. The Velani, whose crystalline physiology had made them outcasts in a galaxy that valued flesh over mineral consciousness, found welcome among humans who saw beauty in their unique perspective. Captain David Walsh, now commanding the newly constructed Earth Defense Station, personally greeted each new group of refugees. "We learned something important during our own crisis," Walsh told the Velani delegation. "Strength doesn't come from having the biggest weapons or the most ships. It comes from understanding that our differences make us stronger, not weaker." The Mordak arrived next, their hive-mind collective consciousness frightening to most galactic species who valued individual thought above all else. But human philosophers and psychologists found their unified perspective fascinating rather than threatening. Dr. Brian Collins, who had pioneered the human Zephyrian communication protocols, worked tirelessly to develop translation methods that could convey the subtle nuances of collective consciousness to individual minds. "They don't think the way we do," Collins explained to a gathering of world leaders. "But that's exactly why their input is so valuable. They see patterns and connections that individual consciousness misses. When we're designing colony layouts or planning resource distribution, their perspective helps us avoid problems we never would have anticipated." The old Galactic Council watched these developments with growing unease from their increasingly empty chambers. World after world petitioned to leave the traditional alliance and join what was being called the Reformed Galactic Alliance. Unlike the Council's rigid hierarchy based on military strength and economic dominance, this new organization celebrated diversity and sought solutions through cooperation rather than coercion. Fleet Admiral Harrison, promoted after his successful defense of Earth, oversaw the construction of New Geneva Station, a massive orbital facility that served as headquarters for the new alliance. The station itself was a marvel of hybrid technology, with human engineering providing the structural foundation, while Zephyrian energy systems and Velani crystalline computing networks created capabilities that surpassed anything the old galaxy had imagined possible. "The most remarkable thing isn't the technology," observed Dr. Jenny Walsh during a tour of the station's research facilities. "It's watching species that were enemies for centuries learning to work together. The Proximans and the Altarians collaborated on our new shield systems. The Centaurians are sharing trade routes they've kept secret for generations. The transformation wasn't without challenges. Cultural misunderstandings still arose daily, and some species struggled to abandon centuries of prejudice and fear. But each success built momentum for the next breakthrough. Each peaceful resolution of conflict demonstrated that there was indeed a better way to organize galactic civilization." Elder Kethvar, now in his final years, often reflected on how a cosmic tragedy had led to something beautiful. "When our star died, we thought our story was ending," he said during a ceremony marking the 5th anniversary of the Zephyrian arrival on Earth. "We never imagined it was actually the beginning of something greater than any of us could have dreamed alone." The old galaxy had been built on fear, competition, and a belief that survival required keeping others down. The new alliance proved that survival could be achieved through lifting others up. As more species abandoned the failing council to join humanity's coalition, it became clear that the universe hadn't turned its back on anyone. It had simply been waiting for someone to show a better way forward. In the end, humanity's greatest strength wasn't their adaptability or their technology. It was their stubborn refusal to abandon hope, even when the entire galaxy told them they were making a mistake.